In times of hardship, our grandparents survived through a resourceful and creative approach to food. During periods of war, famine, and scarcity, the people of Japan, particularly those in rural areas or from poorer backgrounds, relied on simple, often unconventional meals to stay nourished. In today's video on The Lost Taste, we'll explore 15 meals that were once staples of survival for poor families in Japan. These dishes, made from whatever was available, represent the ingenuity and resilience of the Japanese people during difficult times. Let's dive into these forgotten meals and see how they turned simple, sometimes unusual ingredients into life-sustaining dishes. 1. Inago no tsukudani, cooked grasshoppers. In rural Japan, grasshoppers were a vital source of protein. During harvest seasons, these insects were caught in the rice fields and prepared by frying and simmering in a sweet soy sauce mixture. The result was a crispy and nutritious dish that complemented rice or millet. While today, inago might sound unusual or even unappealing to many, it was a common practice in wartime and post-war Japan when protein was hard to come by. The texture was crunchy, and the flavor was sweet, salty, and savory. This dish was a testament to how people made use of the resources available to them. 2. Kujira, whale meat. Encouraged by the government as a cheap protein source, whale meat became ubiquitous in Japan during the 20th century, especially after World War II. Whale meat, particularly the cheaper cuts, was often grilled on skewers, similar to katsu, or used in stews. Its strong flavor and unique texture made it a distinct part of the Japanese diet at the time. For many families, whale meat was not just a novelty, but a necessary survival food that provided much-needed nutrition during difficult times when other meats were scarce. 3. Sweetened gu, dumpling soup. One of the most iconic dishes of post-war famine in Japan was sweetened gu, a simple soup made with flour dumplings. The dumplings were made from just flour and water, boiled in a thin broth, which often consisted of little more than water with a dash of soy sauce or miso. While lacking in flavor and richness, sweetened gu was filling, and it served as a cheap and easy way to feed large families. Despite its humble ingredients, it became a symbol of hardship and the resilience of the Japanese people during the challenging years following the war. 4. Zosui with sweet potato leaves. To make rice last longer, it was often boiled with large amounts of water to turn it into a porridge-like dish known as zosui. In times of scarcity, zosui was mixed with whatever could be found, including the stems and leaves of sweet potatoes. These parts of the plant, which would typically be discarded, were a crucial source of nutrition. By adding these humble plant parts to the porridge, families could stretch their rice further, turning a small portion of rice into a larger, more filling meal. 5. Millet as a substitute for rice. White rice was considered a luxury, especially during and after the war. Most poor families turned to cheaper grains, such as millet, kibi, or barley, mugi, which could be cooked in a similar way to rice. The texture and flavor of millet, however, were far inferior to rice, and it was often viewed as a second-rate substitute. Despite this, it became a staple in the diet of many Japanese families, offering a more affordable option when rice was too expensive or unavailable. 6. Kasu jiru, sake lees soup. Sake lees, the byproduct of sake production, was a cheap and nutritious ingredient that found its way into many poor households. These leftover rice solids, known as sake kasu, were dissolved in hot water to create a milky soup with a slight alcohol content. To make it more filling, leftover vegetables were often added. Kasujiru was a humble dish, but it provided much-needed sustenance and was a perfect example of how nothing went to waste during tough times. 7. Sawdust bread. In extreme periods of scarcity, there are reports of sawdust being mixed with whatever flour was available to stretch it out and make bread. Although the nutritional value was almost non-existent, it served as a way to fill the stomach when food was scarce. This desperate measure, often used during the aftermath of the war, illustrates the lengths to which people went to survive when basic resources were unavailable. 8. Shirako, fish semen. Today, shirako, fish semen, is considered a delicacy in Japan, but during times of scarcity, it was a cheap and nutritious part of the fish. The sacs of semen, typically from cod, were used in soups or grilled, and they were a vital source of nutrition for coastal communities and fishermen's families. While the texture and taste may be off-putting to some, shirako was an essential food for those who could not afford more traditional cuts of fish or meat. 9. Hoya, sea pineapple. Known as sea pineapple due to its appearance, Hoya is a marine invertebrate that was eaten by people living in coastal regions. The taste of Hoya is very complex and strong, with some describing it as medicinal or even chemical. Despite its unusual and intense flavor, Hoya was a valuable source of food that was inexpensive and widely available. It's a perfect example of how people made use of their surroundings and ate whatever was accessible to survive. 10. Unohana, cooked soy pulp. Okara, the fibrous byproduct of tofu production, formed the base of unohana, a dish made by cooking the soy pulp with chopped vegetables, such as carrots and burdock root, and seasoning it with soy sauce. This was a simple, nutritious, and cheap dish that was filling and provided the necessary energy for hard-working families. Unohana demonstrated the importance of utilizing every part of the tofu-making process, turning what would normally be discarded into a hearty meal. 11. American aid rations, Lara ration. After World War II, Japan received aid from the United States in the form of powdered milk, corn, and a corn-soy blend called CSM, corn-soya mixture. These ingredients were foreign to the Japanese palate, and families had to get creative in order to make them palatable. They would use the powdered milk to make porridges and soups, adding whatever ingredients they had on hand to stretch these rations into meals. Though nutritious, these foods were seen as a necessity rather than a treat, and became a symbol of the difficult period Japan went through in the aftermath of the war. 12. Sweet potato dumplings, dango. Sweet potatoes were a crucial food source during times of food scarcity. One common way to prepare them was to mash them and mix them with a bit of flour to create dumplings, dango, which could then be boiled or grilled. These dumplings were a complete meal, offering both carbohydrates and a small amount of protein. They were an affordable and filling dish, representing the creativity needed to make use of what was available. 13. Nukazuke, pickles made from rice bran. Nothing went to waste in wartime Japan, and even vegetable scraps were used. Nukazuke refers to pickles made by fermenting vegetable scraps, such as radish and carrot peels, in a paste of rice bran, nuka. The result was a salty, sour pickle that added flavor and nutrition to otherwise plain meals. Nukazuke not only helped preserve vegetables but also provided a way to make simple dishes more exciting and appetizing. 14. Isaza, ice fish. Isaza are tiny, translucent fish that were caught in large quantities in certain regions of Japan. These fish were often eaten raw, sometimes with a bit of vinegar or soy sauce, in a dish called odorigui, dancing food, because the fish would still be moving when eaten. Despite their size, these fish were an important source of nutrition for coastal communities. Isaza was another example of how people made use of the food available to them in their environment, regardless of how unusual it may have seemed. 15. Azuki bean porridge, unsweetened. While sweet azuki bean porridge, zenzai, is a famous dessert in Japan, during times of food scarcity, azuki beans were simply boiled in water to make a plain porridge without the addition of sugar, which was considered a luxury. This simple, filling dish became a staple for many families struggling to get by, as the beans provided essential nutrients and helped to fill the stomach. The meals our grandparents ate during times of scarcity reflect their resilience, resourcefulness, and ingenuity. From the use of unusual ingredients like grasshoppers and fish semen to making use of every part of plants and animals, these dishes were born out of necessity and survival. They remind us that food, while essential, can also be a symbol of endurance during difficult times. At The Lost Taste, we honor these forgotten meals by remembering how the Japanese people adapted and made the best out of the most challenging circumstances. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history, and be sure to like and subscribe for more stories of the foods that shaped generations. Closing, if you found these meals fascinating, be sure to leave a comment and let us know which one you'd like to learn more about. And don't forget to subscribe to The Lost Taste to discover more about how food has played an essential role in survival and culture throughout history. Until next time.